Hello YouTube friends, I'm back with another YouTube video tutorial. And let's say you want to perform a SEO analysis and would like to rank higher in Google search. Let's say you have a keyword over here and you pick that and you want to analyze what your competitors are doing, such as what keywords they're using in their websites and what they're using for their different tags, such as H2 and H3 here. So for instance, like this article kind of describes what the best practices are, such as having the meta descriptions and having the H1 to H6 tags. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to use Google's programmable search engine to do a search and then to do web scraping to get the content. We're doing all these automation in ActivePieces. And this video is going to be jam-packed with information, so sit back and enjoy this video. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is to navigate to this URL or programmable search engine, and just going to give us an idea of how to get started with this tool. The first thing you're going to do is to go to create a programmable search engine. It will tell you to create a new Google account, and then we're going to have to sign into this control panel where you can create your search engine, right? So we're going to go to that, and we're going to go to navigate to programmable search engine. So if you don't have a search engine yet, you can hit like add here, and you can just name it however you want. You can search for specific sites or pages, or you can search the entire web. So most likely you're going to be selecting the second option here, and then you're going to verify you're not a robot, and then you're going to click create. All right, so once you've created your programmable search engine, you're going to have to obtain an ID and save it for later use. And the next step we're going to do is go to the navigate from the left hand side, and you see the JSON API here. You're going to click on that overview, right? And then we're going to be presented with this page. It gives you an idea what it is, but essentially you're going to have to create a API key here, and you're going to have to create a new project for it. So once you get an API key, get that saved somewhere else, and then we're going to use those two information to query the API. All right, the next thing we're going to look at is how to use the actual REST API. So we're going to go to this URL. We can go to this URL by going down where the JSON API is using REST. As you can see here, you're going to see the base URL that's going to be used, and then the parameters proceeds after that URL. So there's three things that you need to have here. First thing is the API key, which we did have in the last step, and then programmable search engine ID. This is specific to your use case, whether you're searching your website or you're searching the entire web. This is basically set up on this step. The search query, which is, we're using the Q parameter here, which is the actual keyword that's being used to actually do the search. And as you can see here in the bottom, this is how you perform that query. Very simple. All right. Next thing we're going to look at is the different parameters involved in this API, right? So let's examine a few things, such as the H1. Let's say for the LR, let's say you want to retrieve the document for a specific language. This is where you pass in a specific one. You have these options right here. The values that you can use for numbers is how much return search results you want to get back from the API. So you have the values between 1 and 10. So let's say you just want to get a top 1. You can just pass in 1 right in the parameter, and 10 is the maximum that you can include in it. So you're limited by 10 here, but you can also do some sort of pagination. So the way you can do that is to pass in the index, right? So if you want to start at 11, it will start on the second page. This is basically, it kind of tells the search engine that you want to start on this particular page. So you want to go to page 2, you start with result number 11. So this is what it is, how it's going to work. If you want to sort it by a string, you can have that as well. And if you just want to do a site search filter or safety level, then you can enable it by specifying active. By default, it's off. So before we start with the actual automation itself, I'm going to show you guys a diagram of how it's going to look like on a big picture perspective. So from the AI table here, which we're going to be using to store the data, obviously you can use any type of data storage that you want, Postgres, Mongo, or SQL Server, whatever it may be. So the first thing I did here was to add 3 data sheets, right? So first thing is the search, which stores the actual keyword that was used to perform the search, which then will have multiple results. This results data sheet is going to store those values. It's going to store the link, which is the URL, the title, snippet, ranking, and it's going to have a search record ID, which ties back to the search, just like a relational table in database. The next thing is for each results that we get, we're going to go ahead and scrape those results, and we're going to be looking for H2 tags and H3 tags. And then that's going to be stored in this each headings data sheet here. And this results record ID is tied back to the results. So there's like a big relationship between these three tables or data sheet in a table, and that's going to be using for storing our data. All right, last thing I want to discuss here is the actual automation itself, right? So I've created two separate groups here, two separate webhooks that we're going to be using. So the first one is that we're going to be doing here is the first webhook. The first webhook's responsibility is to only do a search on Google and use Google's API. So what it's going to do is it's going to give you a URL that you can use here to be called via HTTP, and then it's going to in turn going to call HTTP request and make a request to Google, and then we're going to go ahead and serialize and return the result for this webhook. So that's pretty much the main flow that's going to happen on this webhook. It's very simple. The main objective here is to keep it simple and have a single responsibility for this single webhook. So the next one we're going to take a look at is the second webhook here. We're going to create a second webhook, which is the entry point to this application. So the main responsibility of this second webhook is to kick off this automation process and make a request to the first webhook. And then once we get the results from the first webhook, we're going to go ahead and parse the JSON string and parse the string and turn it into a JavaScript array. And then for each time we make get a call to this webhook, we're going to go ahead and add a search data sheet record. And once we do that, we're going to go ahead and loop through the results that we receive from step 3, which is an array. We're then going to go ahead and add a code here that does the actual bulk of the work of web scraping. So we're going to go ahead and go to each link and do a web scraping for the H2 and H3 tags. And for each one, we're going to get an array of H2 and H3, which we're going to process later on. And then for each pass of these search results, we're going to be adding to the results data sheet as a record. And for each item's array of H2 and H3 that we receive from step 6, we're going to go ahead and add an entry to the headings data sheet. So, okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the first webhook that we're going to be building here in our automation. So we added a webhook trigger here to kick off this webhook trigger. And that in turn is going to be, and we're going to be expecting a couple of parameters here. So when we switch back to Postman here, we're passing in the keyword and the pages. So those are going to be the two parameters that we're going to be passing in as part of this webhook. Keep in mind that when we call this webhook, we're going to be adding in the /sync so that we can retrieve the results that we get back from this webhook. All right. So once we got that in place, we're going to set up we're going to send an HTTP request to the Google API itself for the search. And then we're going to pass in the Q, which is we're going to be receiving from the parameters from as keyword, and the number of pages, which is going to be the num. The CX is going to be the search engine itself, search ID itself, and then the key is the API key. Okay. So once you got that in place, you're going to see something like this, where you're going to receive the body, and then you're going to get the URL. And the thing that we're interested in is in the items itself. So we're going to examine all these bunch of text here. The main thing that we wanted is the snippet, the title, and the URLs. Okay, the next step in the process is to add a little bit of code here. So in this code, we're going to pass in the results, which is the items that we received back in the previous step. If you can recall here, if you scroll down here, we're going to see the items array, which contains the search results. we're going to go ahead and take it in the code, process the results, and stringify it, which in turn basically serializes the array of JavaScript array so that we can return it back as a return response here. So we're going to do here, we're going to create a JSON object with the results, and then we're going to include the string that we received from the code itself, and then we're going to insert it here and then return it. I'm switching back to Postman here to test the first webhook that we just created here. So I've copied the URL and then I added the /sync. And as part of this call, doing a get method here, we're going to be passing in the keyword and the pages, the amount of pages that we're going to get back from the search results. And then we're going to do hit send here. This is actually going to make a call to the webhook for the search. And this is going to go to Google Search API, where you can see here, it returns a body of JSON, which contains the results, and then the string, which contains the serialized JavaScript array. All right, let's switch back to ActivePieces here and create the second webhook that we have. Obviously, we're going to create a webhook trigger here, which then we're going to have a URL given to us. This is going to be quite simple. We're going to be only taking the keyword as part of this call. So like I previously mentioned, this is going to be kicking off the automation itself. When we call this, it's going to go ahead and make a call to the first webhook that we created earlier. So by doing another send HTTP request here, we're going to pass in the URL for the first webhook. And keep in mind here, we're adding the sync. Just want to note it here. When we make this call, we're actually going to go ahead and receive this body and the results here. And the result is going to be the serialized JavaScript array that we created from the first webhook. We're then going to process this and create a code so we can process the results. So we're going to go ahead and pass in a parameter called JSON results, and then we're going to be adding the results from the second step when we made an HTTP call to the first webhook. So we're going to parse the JSON string. We're going to make a full screen here so you can see what's happening here. I don't have a dependency in this particular code. As you can see here, we're going to take in and accept the JSON results here that we grabbed from the inputs. And we're going to go ahead and parse that string and turn it into an actual JSON object. So once we get the JSON or JavaScript array here, we're just going to go ahead and do a map and only extract a few things of information here, because we don't want everything that's coming back from the body of string that we received from Google. We just want the title, the link, and the snippet itself. And we're going to return for each one. We're going to iterate. We're going to return an object that has those three properties. And then that array is then going to be returned back when we execute this code. All right, once we finish the code, we're going to go ahead and expand this so you can see what's happening here. Once you hit retest or test, it's basically going to go and give you an array here of objects. And it's going to give you the title, the link, and the snippet. So this is pretty much like a cleaned up version of what we received from Google, because we're only interested in these three different things. In the next step of the process, once we've got an array here, we can then use this output at a later step in this automation process. And the next step is what we're going to be doing is, if you remember from the diagram, we're going to be inserting into the search data sheet in Aitable. So we're just basically going to create a record here using the keyword. So that's going to be the initial record that we're going to be adding in Aitable. It's going to only contain the keyword, right? All right. So after we added a record to search data sheet, we're going to go ahead and add a loop step here. So basically, we're going to go ahead from step 3, where we added the code, which returns the title, the link, and the snippet. It's going to give us an array of those objects, right? So we're going to get this title, link, and snippet. So loop 5 is basically going to be assigned to this via parse JSON string, which is step. And we're going to go through each item of this array, right? So we're going to go ahead and add a code here, which we're then going to be passed in as a parameter, as a link, title, and snippet, which is going to be coming from that step, which is from the parse JSON. All right, so once we've added all those three parameters, we can open this up and make this full screen. We're going to be adding two packages here. One is the Axios for making HTTP requests, and the second one is for Cheerio, which is for parsing HTML. So the entry point for this application, as usual, is the code, asynchronous function here that's going to be executed. We're declaring the two libraries on the top, the Axios and Cheerio, from Axios and Cheerio respectively. And this code is going to be calling this function which result is going to be returned back into the calling code. So let's inspect the get text from URL here, which takes in the inputs. So we're just going to straight up just pass in the inputs here. It's an asynchronous function. We're going to be destructuring the three parameters that we receive, the title, link, and snippet. For convenience, we're declaring the tags here on the top for whatever tags we're trying to parse of our web scrape from the website that we're doing or we're working on. The next thing is we're going to declare an output here, which is what we're going to be sending back when we call this function. So we're just returning back the title, link, snippet, and then we're declaring and initializing the H2 and H3 here. Just in case it fails, we're wrapping it inside a try-catch block here. If things goes wrong, then we're just going to return the original output, and the H2 and H3 is going to be blank and encounters an error instead of throwing an exception here. So we're just going to log it down here. So inside the body itself, we're doing a couple of things. One is to make a GET request and using Axios to make an HTTP GET request. Once we get the response, we're going to go ahead and load it up and store this into a variable called HTML. Everything here is in response.data. We're going to go ahead and assign inside a dollar variable here. We're going to load up the Cheerios so that we can go ahead and parse the HTML. We're going to go ahead and iterate through each tags. Remember that H2 tags and H3 tags are up here. So we're going to loop through this array. So it's going to be, for each pass, going to be H2 and H3. So we're going to take all the H2 and H3 from each fragments of HTML here, and we're going to make an array out of it. Once we get an array out of it, it's going to be stored in this variable called tag text list, right? So there's two options here that are provided. The second option is obviously a little bit harder to read, but basically it creates a mapping of the tag text list. This is not the actual HTML. This is the Cheerio DOM representation. So we're going to go ahead and map to each one and grab the text and then remove the white spaces. So essentially that's what we're doing here. But if it's easy, I think that the first step is much easier to read. If it's easier to read if you're just kind of looking at the code from afar. So essentially, it's just going to be creating a new empty array here, and then it's going to go ahead and loop through each tag text list array, which is a DOM representation, and it's going to go ahead and assign the text for each one into this variable called tag text. Once it's done doing that, it's going to go ahead and push the text inside this tag, which is either H2 or H3. So that's going to be the first option here. I think this one's easier to read, but this one-liners also, it works also good as well. So whatever option you want to choose, it's up to you. Whether you're going for readability of code or you just want to have a cool factor, then you can go with a second approach here. So that's going to be the makeup for the code here. We can go ahead and close this, and then we can hit retest. So this one's going to take a little bit longer, as this is actually going ahead and going to scrape the link we provided. So now we receive here a title, the link, and the snippet that we received for each item. But we're also going to get the H2 and H3, right? Which contains the array of H2s that we found when we did the web scraping. So for this title, we're getting this link. We went and web scraped it, and it found these H2s in these pages. Some of them are not going to have H3, and some of them might not have H2 as well. So it just depends on the makeup of the HTML page for that website. Okay, once we receive the actual, for each item here that we've gone and scraped, so obviously we have a title, link, snippet, and there's an array of H2 and H3, right? So the next step is to add his to results data sheet. So each time we get a result, we're going to add a record into this results data sheet in AI table. Once this is going to include the 3 different things that we've gotten, right? So from step 6, we're going to get the title, link, and the snippet. Snippet is description for that page. And then we're going to also include a ranking, which is the index that we get from the loop. So every time if we do a test on this loop, we're actually going to get this index automatically. For some reason, they call it index, which is not really an actual index because it starts at a 0. Typically, you'll see like 0 here. It's a starting point for an index, but in any case, we're getting a number here. So for the first pass, we're going to get 1, and then in the second pass, we're going to get number 2. So that's what we're going to be using here on our ranking. So that's what we're going to be inserting here as the ranking here. And then for the search record ID, so remember that the search results is tied back to the initial insertion of the data sheet here. So when we actually insert a record here, it returns this record ID over here, right? So that's how we're going to be associating the results data sheet with the original search data sheet here, is by inserting the record ID here. So that's what we're going to be doing here. So just add this record ID here, and then I think that's it. Okay, we're almost at the end of the automation here. So the last things that we're going to be looking at is the H2 and H3 loops. So we added 2 loops here. One is for the H2, which we're going to be using the step 6 array of H2 here. As you can remember, this one provides an H2 array and an H3. So for each pass, we're going to be getting a list or an array of H2 and H3, right? And that's what we're going to be using here. We're going to add a loop step, which we named it loop on H2 items. We're then going to be using the items from step 6 to loop through it. And for each pass, we're going to include and insert a record in AI table. It's called for the headings. And the text itself is going to be the item from step 8. For each H2 item, we're going to get a text, which is the H2 title or text. And then we're going to receive the record ID, which is coming from the previous step, from step 7, which gives us the record ID from that result data sheet when we create a new record. So once we've added this one, we specified H2 as a tag. We're going to be doing the same thing for the second loop, which is for the H3 items. It's completely identical as the previous H2 items, except that we're going to be specifying the actual H3 here for the tag. In same case, we're going to be, instead of looping through the H2, we're going to be using the H3 item that we received from web scraping H2 and H3 step. So that's going to be the makeup for this last step of this automation. All right, before we wrap up the video here, I'm just going to do a quick test here of the automation. So I do have Postman here on the left. I copied the second webhooks URL here, and I'm doing a get request for this keyword, how to do automation testing. And as you can see here on the right, it's currently running. I'm going to switch back to AI tables here and go to result. It did created a keyword automation testing here. They added, and part of the result is still running, but it's adding the results from Google search. This includes the individual title and the link for the top 10 results that we've gotten, right? And then for each results that we've gotten, we went ahead and grabbed the individual H2 and H3 that we received from the results. So that's pretty much it for this video. If you like this video and you got any value out of it, please consider subscribing to my channel. And if there's any suggestions and things that you want to see from me in the future, please leave a comment, and I'll see you next time. Bye.